Have you ever felt like you're not alone, even when you are? That prickling sensation on the back of your neck, the feeling of eyes on you from an empty corner. I used to dismiss it. I used to tell myself it was just my imagination, a trick of the light, the house settling. I was wrong. It all began a few months ago. This strange, unsettling routine. It was subtle at first, almost unnoticeable. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, my heart pounding, with a vague sense of dread. I'd check the clock on my nightstand, and it would always be the same. 2:17 a.m. Every single night. At first, I didn't connect the time with anything else. I just thought I had developed some weird internal alarm clock. But then, I started noticing it. In the corner of my bedroom, where the two walls meet near the window, there was a shadow. Now, shadows are normal at night, right? The moonlight casts strange shapes. A tree branch outside can look like a grasping hand. But this was different. This shadow was solid. It was darker than the surrounding darkness, an absolute void of light. It had a shape, a definite form. It was tall, unnervingly so, almost touching the ceiling. It didn't have features, no arms or legs I could make out, just a towering, slender silhouette. It was just there. Every night, I'd wake up at 2:17, and my eyes would snap open, drawn to that corner as if by a magnet. And every night, it would be there. It never moved. It never made a sound. It just stood, watching. The first few times, I was terrified. I'd pull the covers over my head, squeezing my eyes shut, praying for morning. I'd lie there, listening to my own frantic heartbeat, too scared to even breathe. But after a week, a strange sort of acceptance set in. Fear gave way to a morbid curiosity. What was it? Why was it here? And why did it only appear at 2:17 a.m.? I started to conduct little experiments. I'd leave a nightlight on. The shadow was still there, a stark, black figure against the dim glow. It didn't waver. It didn't fade. The light just seemed to bend around it, unable to penetrate its oppressive darkness. I tried sleeping on the couch in the living room. For a few nights, it worked. I slept through till morning, feeling refreshed and, more importantly, safe. But on the third night, I woke up with a jolt. The digital clock on the cable box glowed with angry red numbers. 2:17 a.m. I slowly turned my head towards the darkest corner of the living room. And there it was, the sametal, silent silhouette, waiting for me. It was following me. This realization sent a fresh wave of terror through me. This wasn't about my bedroom. It was about me. I went back to sleeping in my room after that. If it was going to find me anyway, I might as well be in the comfort of my own bed. The routine continued. 2:17 a.m. Wake up. See. The shadow. Stare at it until I eventually fell back into a restless sleep. It became a bizarre, unwelcome part of my life. I started getting obsessed. During the day, I would stare at the empty corner, trying to find any explanation. A stain on the wallpaper, a trick of the architecture. But there was nothing. It was just a normal corner in a normal room. I searched online for shadow people, recurring apparitions, night terrors. I found thousands of stories. People from all over the world describing similar experiences. Tall, featureless black figures standing in doorways, at the foot of their beds, or just watching from a corner. Some stories were terrifying, describing how the shadows would move, would get closer. Mine never did. It was always perfectly still, a silent sentinel in the dark. This gave me a small, fragile sliver of comfort. Maybe it was harmless. Maybe it was just an observer. One night, about a month into this ordeal, I decided I'd had enough. The fear, the lack of sleep, the constant dread was wearing me down. I was jumpy during the day, exhausted, and my friends were starting to notice. I needed to confront this thing, whatever it was. Primeramente, de plan. I placed my brightest lamp on my nightstand, the one with the high wattage bulb. I plugged it in, but kept it switched off. My finger rested on the switch. I lay in bed, pretending to be asleep. But my mind was wide awake, every nerve ending tingling with anticipation and fear. I watched the clock tick past 2:15. 216. My heart was a drum against my ribs. As the numbers flipped to 217, I felt the familiar shift in the room's atmosphere. The air grew cold and heavy. I didn't even need to open my eyes to know it was there. But, primera, did. I slowly opened them, and there it stood, in its usual spot. A column of absolute black. My hand trembled as I tightened my grip on the lamp switch. It was now or never. He took a deep, shaky breath, and with a surge of adrenaline-fueled courage, I flicked the switch. The room was instantly flooded with brilliant, harsh light. I squinted, my eyes struggling to adjust. I looked at the corner. It was empty. The chair, the wall, the window, everything was normal. A wave of relief so powerful, it almost made me dizzy, washed over me. It was gone. The light had scared it away. I let out a shaky laugh, a sound that was half sob. Elf, hysteria. It was just a shadow after all. A simple trick of the dark, banished by a simple light bulb. I felt foolish, but immensely, overwhelmingly relieved. But then, as my eyes fully adjusted to the brightness, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The corner was empty. Yes, the three-dimensional figure was gone. But the shadow was still there. It was no longer a towering shape standing in the corner. Instead, it was pressed flat against the wall. It looked like someone had taken that column of darkness and squashed it against the plaster. It was a perfect, dark silhouette, a man-shaped stain on the brightly lit wall. It wasn't a shadow being cast by anything. It was the shadow itself, embedded into the very surface of my room. I stared, frozen in horror. The light from the lamp was hitting it directly, but it remained pitch black, absorbing the light, swallowing it whole. It was a hole in my reality, a scar on my wall, and as I watched, unable to look away, I thought I saw it do something it had never done before. I thought I saw it twitch, justa little, subtle ripple across its flat, dark surface, like a living thing, pinned against the wall, but still aware. Still watching. I've left the lamp on ever since. I can't sleep in the dark anymore, because now I know it doesn't leave when the lights come on. It just changes form. It's still there, pressed into the corner of my room, and every time I glance at it, I can't shake the feeling that one day it's going to peel itself off the wall. And then it will be able to move. Thanks for watching. If you've ever experienced something like this, share your story in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more chilling tales. Stay safe, and always check the corners of your room. Have you ever felt like you're being watched, even when you're completely alone? It's a primal feeling, isn't it? That little prickle on the back of your neck. Most of the time, you shrug it off. An old house settling. The wind, your imagination running wild. I used to be the same way. I'd rationalize every bump in the night, every fleeting shadow in the corner of my eye. But then came the night in the bathroom, the night that shattered my comfortable reality and replaced it with a constant, gnawing dread. It started innocently enough. It was late, maybe 2 or 3 in the morning. I couldn't sleep, my mind racing with the usual stresses of life work, bills, the endless to-do list. I got up to splash some cold water on my face, hoping it would either wake me up enough to be productive or shock my system into finally wanting to sleep. The house was dead quiet, wrapped in that profound silence that only the deep of night can offer. Every creak of the floorboards under my bare feet seemed to sound like a gunshot. I padded into the bathroom, the cold tile a shock against my skin. I didn't bother with the main overhead light, just flicked on the soft vanity lights above the mirror. Their warm glow cast long, dancing shadows across the small room. I leaned over the sink, cupped my hands, and splashed the icy water onto my face. It was a jolt, sharp and refreshing. I grabbed a towel, patting my skin dry, and when I looked up, that's when I saw it. It wasn't in the room with me, not exactly. It was in the mirror. Over my shoulder, standing just behind my reflection, was a figure. It was tall, impossibly so. Its form stretched and distorted like a reflection in a funhouse mirror, but without any of the humor. It was a silhouette, a void of absolute black that seemed to absorb the soft light from the vanity bulbs. It was shaped like a person, but wrong. The limbs were too long, the torso too narrow. It was a caricature of a human being drawn by something that had only ever heard a vague description of one. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the otherwise silent house. My first instinct, pure, unadulterated terror, made me spin around. I expected to come face to face with an intruder, with this thing. But there was nothing. Just the tiled wall of the bathroom, the closed door, the shower curtain hanging limp and still. The air was empty. I was alone. My breath came in ragged gasps. I told myself I was tired, that my sleep-deprived brain was playing tricks on me. It was just a shadow, a weird trick of the light from the vanity. My own shadow, probably warped by the angle. To be. He took a deep shaky breath, trying to calm the frantic pounding in my chest, and slowly, hesitantly, I turned back to the mirror. My own face stared back at me, pale and wide-eyed, but behind my reflection, the shadow was still there. It hadn't moved. It was just standing there, a silent, dark sentinel in the glass world. I stared, mesmerized and horrified. I tried to reason with myself. It's a smudge on the mirror, a weird reflection from something outside the window. Anything but what it looked like. And then it moved. It wasn't a sudden motion. It was slow, deliberate, and utterly chilling. The head of the shadow, a featureless black oval, tilted. It raised its head, as if it were studying me with eyes I couldn't see. A wave of cold washed over me that had nothing to do with the water on my face. This wasn't a trick of the light. Shadows don't move on their own. They don't observe you. I was frozen in place, my feet seemingly fused to the floor tiles. I couldn't scream, couldn't run. All I could do was stare into the mirror, my own reflected eyes wide with terror, and watch this impossible thing. We were locked in a strange, silent standoff, me and the shadow in the mirror. I could feel a strange pressure in the air, a static charge that made the tiny hairs on my arms stand up. The silence in the room felt heavier now, like it was being crushed by the presence of this entity. Then, the unthinkable happened. The shadow blinked. It was a subtle, quick motion. But in the stillness of that moment, it was as loud as a thunderclap. A brief break in the solid blackness of its form. Where the head was, it blinked. A blink is such a normal, human action. We do it thousands of times a day without a second thought. But seeing this violation of nature, this shadow person, perform such a mundane, biological action broke something inside my mind. The dam of my denial shattered into a million pieces. And in that split second, as my brain struggled to process the impossible sight of a shadow blinking, a far more terrifying realization slammed into me. It was a detail so small, so fundamental, that I hadn't even registered it until that very moment. I stared at my own reflection, at my own two eyes staring back from the glass, wide and unmoving. I had been so focused on the shadow, on its impossible movement and its chilling blink, that I hadn't noticed. My reflection hadn't blinked. Not when the shadow did, not once since I'd looked up from the sink. My eyes were burning from staring so intently. They were dry and aching. I should have blinked dozens of times by now, but the face in the mirror hadn't. My heart didn't just pound anymore. It felt like it stopped. The blood turned to ice in my veins. The man in the mirror, the one who looked exactly like me, was just staring. His expression was a perfect match for my own terror, yet there was a stillness to him, a horrifying lack of life. He was a perfect copy, a puppet, and I was suddenly, terrifyingly aware that something else was pulling the strings. The shadow behind him. Behind me. It tilted its head again, slightly, and in the mirror, my reflection's lips curved upwards into the faintest, slightest hint of a smile. It was a smile that didn't reach his eyes, a smile I wasn't making. I finally found my voice, and a choked, strangled sob escaped my throat. I stumbled backward, away from the sink, away from the mirror. I tripped over my own feet and crashed onto the floor, scrambling away on my hands and knees like a cornered animal. I didn't dare look back. I crab walked out of the bathroom, my eyes fixed on the empty doorway, expecting that tall, thin figure to emerge from it. At any second, I made it to my bedroom and slammed the door, locking it, wedging a chair under the handle. A flimsy defense against something that lived in reflections. I spent the rest of the night huddled in the corner of my room, wrapped in a blanket, shaking uncontrollably. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it. The tall, thin shadow. The blink, and the chilling, alien smile on my own face in the mirror. Since that night, my life has been a living hell. I haven't looked in a mirror. Primera. ¿Qué? En it. I covered every reflective surface in my house, the bathroom mirror, the one in the hallway, even the darkened screen of my television. I shave by touch, a risky and clumsy process. I comb my hair by feel. I have no idea what I look like anymore, and I pray I never have to find out. But it doesn't end there. I catch glimpses. The reflection in a shop window as I hurry past. The glint of my own eyes in the rearview mirror of my car for a split second before I can look away. And every time, I see it just for a flash. A flicker of movement behind me that isn't mine. A shape that's too tall, too thin. Sometimes, when it's quiet, I can feel it. That same cold pressure, that feeling of being watched. I know it's still with me. The shadow that blinked. And I'm left with the most terrifying question of all. If the thing in the mirror is my reflection, and it's being controlled by that shadow, then what am I? The real one? Or am I just the reflection on this side of the glass? I don't know the answer, and I'm not sure I want to. Thank you for listening. Stay safe, and maybe, just maybe, avoid looking too closely the next time you see your reflection. You never know what might be looking back. My son, Leo, used to tell me about the man in the hallway. He was only 6, and his imagination was a wild, untamed thing. He'd creep into my room in the dead of night, his little body trembling, and whisper, "Mommy, the man is watching me again." I'd hug him tight, smooth his hair, and tell him it was just a dream. But he'd shake his head, his eyes wide and serious. "No, he's real. He stands at the end of the hall, by the linen closet. He just watches my door." To calm his fears, I'd walk him back to his room. We'd stand in his doorway together, peering down the long, dark corridor. There was nothing there, just the faint, shifting patterns of light from passing cars, dancing on the walls. "See, sweetie?" I'd say, my voice soft. "It's just shadows from the headlights. They're making funny shapes, that's all." I even showed him one night, pointing as a truck rumbled by, its beams stretching and contorting the familiar shape of the coat rack into something momentarily monstrous. He seemed to accept this, but the fear in his eyes never truly faded. I tried everything. I bought him a new nightlight, one shaped like a friendly cartoon rocket ship that splashed a galaxy of soft, colorful stars across his ceiling. I left his door slightly ajar so the light from the living room could spill in. I even sprayed his room with a monster spray I made from lavender water, assuring him it would keep any bad things away. For a while, it seemed to work. The nightly visits stopped. I told myself he'd finally outgrown the phase, that his rational mind had conquered his nighttime fears. I was so relieved. I was also so wrong. It was a Tuesday in late October. The wind howled outside, rattling the window frames and whipping tree branches against the side of the house. The weather forecast had warned of a severe storm, and it arrived with a vengeance. The lights flickered once, twice, then plunged us into absolute darkness. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the raging storm. My first thought was Leo. I fumbled for the flashlight I kept in my bedside table, my heart starting to pound. With the beam cutting a shaky path in front of me, I made my way to his room. His door was wide open. The rocket ship nightlight was dead, the stars gone. Leo was sitting straight up in bed, staring not at me, but past me, into the hallway. "Mommy," he whispered, his voice so faint I could barely hear it over the storm. "He's still here." I turned, my blood running cold. I swept the flashlight beam down the length of the hallway. The power was out. The streetlights were dark. There were no cars on the road, no headlights to cast their deceptive shadows. But at the far end of the hall, right where he always said it would be, stood a figure. It wasn't a trick of the light. It wasn't a coat rack or a pile of laundry. It was a silhouette, impossibly tall and thin, darker than the surrounding darkness. It was utterly still, a void in the shape of a man. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't scream. My body was frozen, but my mind was racing. Every rational explanation evaporated, leaving only a raw, primal terror. It wasn't a shadow. It was something asterisk, casting asterisk, a shadow where no light existed. It was solid, present, and it was watching. Its form was just a suggestion, but the focus of its attention was unmistakable. It was directed right at Leo's room, at us. I snatched Leo from his bed, pulling him into my arms. He buried his face in my shoulder, his small hands gripping my shirt so tightly his knuckles were white. "Don't let him get me," he sobbed. I backed away slowly, never taking my eyes off the figure. I slammed his bedroom door shut and fumbled with the lock, my hands shaking so badly it took 3 tries. We huddled together in the dark, listening. The storm raged outside, a chaotic symphony that couldn't drown out the suffocating silence inside the house. I tried to tell myself it was my mind playing tricks on me, that the stress of the storm and my son's persistent fears had finally gotten to me, creating a shared hallucination. But I knew what I saw. It was as real as the child trembling in my arms. We stayed in his room for what felt like an eternity, pressed against the door, waiting for the sound of a footstep, a creak of the floorboards, the turn of a doorknob. But nothing came. When dawn finally broke, painting the sky in shades of gray and pink, the power was still out. The storm had passed. With my heart in my throat, I slowly unlocked the door and peeked out. The hallway was empty. The morning light streamed in, illuminating every corner. There was no one there. It was just an ordinary hallway. I wanted to believe it was over, a nightmare brought on by the blackout. But that night, as I lay in bed, unable to sleep, I heard a faint sound, a soft, rhythmic scratching. It was coming from the other side of my bedroom wall, the wall that separated my room from the hallway. It sounded like fingernails dragging slowly, deliberately, across the drywall. It went on for hours. We moved out a week later. I couldn't explain it to the landlord or the moving company. I just packed our things and left. I told my friends and family the old house had too many problems, that the commute was too long. I never told anyone the real reason. How could I? How could I explain that we were being haunted not by a ghost, but by a shadow? We live in a new apartment now, a bright, modern place on the 3rd floor of a busy building. There are no long, dark hallways. Leo sleeps in the room next to mine, and he says he doesn't see the man anymore. He seems happier, lighter. But sometimes, I'll wake up in the middle of the night, with that same prickling feeling of being watched. I'll lie perfectly still, my eyes wide open in the dark, and I'll listen. I'll listen for the scratching, and sometimes I think I can still hear it, faint and far away, as if it's trying to find us, as if it knows that, no matter how far we run, some shadows will always follow. It started subtly, so subtly, that I almost convinced myself I was just tired, overworked, maybe a little stressed. You know how your shadow stretches and shrinks, a loyal, silent twin tethered to your heels. Well, mine got a new friend, a second shadow. I first noticed it on a bright Tuesday afternoon, walking home from the office. There was my shadow, crisp and dark on the pavement. And then, just a little behind it, a fainter, slightly distorted echo. I stopped, turned, looked around. The street was empty, just the sun, me, and 2 shadows. I brushed it off. A trick of the light, a strange reflection from a window. Something, anything logical. But it kept happening. On sunny days, this second shadow would lag behind, always out of sync. If I took a sharp turn, it would glide past the corner a second too late. If I jumped, it would land a fraction after I did. It was like a poorly dubbed movie, but for my own silhouette. The creepiest part, it was never quite the same shape as me. Sometimes the shoulders were broader. Sometimes the head was tilted at an unnatural angle. It was a distorted mimicry, a warped copy. Under streetlights at night, it was even worse. My real shadow would fall one way, cast by the orange glow above. But the other one, it would lean the wrong way, defying the very laws of light and physics. It would stretch towards a dark alleyway when I was walking away from it, or shrink into a dense, compact shape right at my feet. Even when the light source was far away, I started taking pictures, trying to capture it, to prove to myself I wasn't losing my mind. But in every photo, there was just me. One person, one shadow. It was like it knew when the lens was on it. It was shy, or maybe it was smart. My friends thought I was crazy. "You need a vacation, man," they'd say, clapping me on the shoulder. "Too much screen time." I tried to believe them. I took a week off, went hiking in the mountains, hoping the clean air and open spaces would clear my head. But even there, on a narrow trail with the sun directly overhead, I'd see it, a flicker of movement in my periphery, a smudge of darkness that didn't belong. It was more cautious out in the open, sticking closer, almost merging with my real shadow. But I knew it was there. I could feel its presence, a cold spot on the back of my neck, the feeling of being watched, constantly. The fear started as a slow burn and quickly grew into a raging inferno. I became obsessed. I spent hours online, digging through forums on paranormal activity, folklore, and obscure physics. I read about shadow people, doppelgangers, interdimensional beings. None of it quite fit. This wasn't just a fleeting glimpse of a figure in the dark. This was a persistent, personal haunting attached directly to me. It felt parasitic. I tried everything. I walked only in crowded areas, hoping the chaos of other people and their shadows would confuse it or drive it away. But it was no use. In a sea of moving silhouettes, mine was the only one with a dark, persistent itcho. I tried staying indoors, drawing all the curtains, living in near total darkness. For a while, that brought some relief. In the absence of light, there can be no shadow. But I couldn't live like a hermit forever. The moment I stepped outside or even turned on a single lamp, it would be there, waiting. It seemed patient. The psychological toll was immense. Sleep became a luxury I could rarely afford. I'd jolt awake from nightmares where the shadow would peel itself off the floor and stand over my bed, a featureless, three-dimensional void. My work suffered. My relationships frayed. How do you explain to someone that you're being stalked by your own light-cast silhouette? You don't. You just withdraw, letting the fear hollow you out from the inside. I started to wonder if it was trying to communicate. I'd stand in front of a wall, lit by a single lamp, and watch it. I'd raise my right arm. My shadow would raise its right arm. The other one, it would sometimes twitch, or its own arm would lift slowly, hesitantly. It was learning. It was becoming a better mimic. The lag was decreasing. The movements were becoming more fluid, more independent. The faintness was solidifying into a deeper, richer black, almost indistinguishable from my true shadow. They were starting to look like twins. That's when the real terror set in. What was its endgame? Was it trying to replace my shadow, or was it trying to replace me? The thought was so absurd, so utterly insane, that it felt terrifyingly real. It was no longer just a follower. It was an understudy, waiting in the wings for its cue. Which brings me to tonight. I've had enough. I can't run anymore. I can't hide. I need to confront this, whatever it is. So I've come here, to this empty parking garage late at night. The long fluorescent lights overhead cast sharp, clear shadows. It's the perfect stage. I'm standing in the middle of a vacant level. It's dead quiet, except for the low hum of the lights and the frantic drumming of my own heart. I look down. There's my shadow, stretched out in front of me, and right next to it, just as dark, just as clear, is the other one. For the first time, they're perfectly in sync. Identical twins of darkness. I hold my breath. I've decided not to move. Not a muscle. I'm going to stand here, perfectly still, and see what it does. Will it remain still to a perfect mirror, or will it finally reveal itself? The air is cold, heavy. The silence is deafening. I'm a statue carved from fear. My eyes are locked on the two shapes on the concrete floor. 1 second passes to 10. My legs start to ache, my lungs burn, but I don't move. I watch, and then it happens. I am standing perfectly still. My shadow is motionless, a faithful imprint of my form. But the other one, the one that followed me, it's moving. It's slowly lifting an arm. Its head is turning, tilting up as if to look at me. It's peeling itself away from the ground. The flat, two-dimensional shape gaining depth, rising from the concrete. It's not a shadow anymore. It's a silhouette, standing on its own, and it's taking a step toward me. Thanks for watching. If you have stories about things you can't explain, share them in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more unsettling tales. Stay safe out there, and maybe don't look too closely at your shadow.